Welcome to my channel. This is Dr. Emmanuel, and today I want to just do a very short video on some relevant tips that could help one in passing their IELTS examination. And in this volume one, we'll just be looking at a few tips that could help us pass our listening and our reading tests. And so just to mention, even though I've written here that is to help us pass the IELTS academic, for the listening and reading, for both the IELTS general and the IELTS academic, the questions are the same. So I've just put together a few important information as regards the IELTS examination. So as we know, the IELTS examination stands for the International English Language Tests. Okay, and this is a test that some countries like the UK, Australia, I think Canada, some institutions in these countries recognize these examination as as a test of English proficiency. Okay, so some universities for some master's students, and even for some jobs like in the healthcare, doctors, nurses, you'll be required to prove that you are proficient in English, so you can communicate with members of staff and patients. So the IELTS exam has 4 sections. We have the listening section, the reading section, the writing section, and the speaking section. The listening section lasts 30 minutes actually, and then at the end of the 30 minutes, you will have 10 minutes to put together your answers and make sure your result is decently organized. And you have 40 questions in your listening test. In the reading test, you have 60 minutes, which is 1 hour, and you have 40 questions. In your writing, the writing usually lasts for an hour, which is 60 minutes, and it has 2 sections. So because as a doctor, I did the academic IELTS. I'm conversant with the academic writing. I haven't had experience with the IELTS general, so I wouldn't be able to say what the IELTS general is all about when it comes to writing. Okay, and for the academic IELTS, you have the descriptive part or analytical writing, where you might have to describe a graph or multiple graphs and maybe tables. And then you have what we call the academic essay, okay, where you'll be given a question, usually to talk about both sides of an argument. The speaking test sometimes happens on the same day as the other parts of the test. Sometimes the speaking test happens on a different day. Okay, it could come before or after on the same day as you're doing the other sections of the IELTS examination. Speaking tests typically last about 15 minutes on average, sometimes less. I've put 15 to 20 minutes, but most times it doesn't last as long as 20 minutes. Usually has 3 sections also, where you would actually have to talk about different concepts. You'll be given different concepts to talk about, and you would have to talk about it. In this particular video, we wouldn't be talking about the speaking test, but I'll just give a very good clue, something which is very important. In the speaking test, your examiner is not necessarily looking out for the veracity or the truth in what you are saying. What they're looking out is for your proficiency, how well you speak. So they might ask you to describe a time in history, something memorable, something that makes you so excited, and you might just cook up something in your head. But the most important thing is your ability to tell that story in a very fluent way. And then right there, I've just put a website. This is not an advert, but this is just me saying, hey, look, IELTSList.com is a website that I personally use when I prepared for IELTS, and I found it very helpful. And I think that was my main study material. That's, and whenever my friends ask me, how did you prepare for IELTS? I always tell them, look, go to IELTS Liz. It's a website which is, run by a lady called Liz, and she's an excellent IELTS tutor. So make use of IELTSList.com. You may or may not choose to do her subscription, but she has some free, useful resources. So let's look at some tips for listening. So when it comes to the listening test in your IELTS test, we said it lasts for 30 minutes. The actual voice recording that you will hear lasts 30 minutes. And within 30 minutes, you have to listen to various speakers and extract the answers to different questions. And then at the end, you will have 10 minutes to wrap up, 10 minutes to make sure you've crossed your I's, to make sure you've dotted your I's and crossed your T's, make sure, your punctuations and your use of capitalization, capital or small letters and all of that has been appropriately done. You need rapt attention to actually be able to hear what the speaker is saying and extract your answers. Okay. And another thing is usually in IELTS, because it's a professional exam, they usually use voice notes that are very clear. Okay, so you may not really struggle to hear what the speakers are saying. When you watch some movies, you hear people speaking some very deep Caucasian accents that may be difficult to understand. But in the IELTS exam, usually, even if the speakers are British or Australian or Americans, the accents are usually very clear and easy to understand. But you still need that rapt attention to listen, to hear, and to extract the answers. There'll be brief moments, where you would hear prompts. You hear the voice telling you that you have a few seconds to prepare for questions 1 to 5, for instance. So when you get those prompts, you quickly skim, you quickly rush through those questions, try to have an insight into what those questions are looking for. Is question 1 looking for the name of a person? Is question 1 looking for a year or a date of birth or something, or the age of a person, or what someone recommends? So you now start listening and trying to hear when that particular answer is mentioned. So you can use a pencil. Personally, I used pencil for all sections of my IELTS. Okay, the listening, the reading, and the writing, because I have a bad handwriting. And I figured that using pencil helps me write better than when I use a pen. So if you're someone who has a bad writing, you can use a pencil. Another benefit of using pencil is when you have to erase, when you have to change your writing, it makes your work less messy. It makes it still decent because you can click, you can easily erase and rewrite. I'll advise you write your answers in all block letters. So if the answer to your question is inside the water, for instance, or on the table, if that's your answer, write everything in block letter, the ON, the THE, and the table, everything in block letter. The benefit of doing this is that you can't be failed for misusing block and small letters. So if you write all your answers in block letter, it's very valid and you will get your score. So write what you hear. Sometimes you might have to, sometimes the answers to 2 or 3 questions come in quick succession. Usually they try to avoid that, try to give some reasonable interval between the answers. But once in a while, 2 or 3 answers may come in quick succession. And if you are not very, attentive, you might miss the answer. And what happens to some candidates is sometimes when you miss the answer to 1, maybe question 5, you miss the answer to question 5, the voice note doesn't stop. It continues. The answers to question 6 may be said. Sometimes the answer to question 7 may be said. But because you've been so distressed by the fact that you've missed out on the answer to question 5, you might also miss out on the answers to question 6 and 7. So hear what you say. If you're not really sure of what you heard, put it down as the answer first and keep listening. It's better to fail one than to fail more than one, isn't it? That makes sense. So remember that speed is needed. You need to be very fast. You need to be very attentive. Your attention should be 10 over 10 when you're doing your IELTS test. Rest well the day before, probably 1 or 2 days before. Try to sleep well at night and go in with your brain well rested. Depending on where you're taking these listening tests, you may have personal headphones. So all candidates within the hall might have their individual headphones, which was the case when I did my IELTS in 2017. But in some places, you will have external speakers in the hall. So you wouldn't have personal headphones. You just have some large speakers in the hall, and you have to listen attentively. And then based on where you're sat in that hall, if you're sat far away from the speakers, then you're already at a disadvantage because you have to be super attentive to hear exactly what is being said. At the end of the speaking test, listening test, at the end of your listening test, you have 10 minutes to put together all your answers. Okay, that's good. So this sheet shows us what the answer sheets. It just shows us what the answer sheets for the IELTS looks like. So it's 1 to 40 questions, and you just keep putting your answers down, preferably using your pencil and preferably in all block letters. And at the end, you have 10 minutes to make sure you've properly documented your answers, your results. This is how the IELTS listening scores come. So you have scores. It's 40 questions. So if you score 40 over 40, you have a band 9. If you score 39 over 40, you also have a band 9. If you score 30 over 40, you have a band 7. So depending on what you need your IELTS for, as a medical doctor, to work in the UK, for the NHS, with GMC license, you need an overall average of at least 7.5 overall. And then in each section, you need at least 7.0. So which means in your listening, you shouldn't be scoring less than 30. But I will say, if you want to have, that certainty that you're going to pass, target not scoring less than 33. So when you're preparing, when you're doing some mock tests, try to score above 33 in your listening consistently. Let's look at a few tips as regards the reading test. So our reading test has 3 sections. One section usually will be easy. One section will be tough. And one section will be in between in terms of how difficult it will be. You can't know which section would be easy or tough until you start. Personally, in my exam, the first part was hard. Okay, in the exam I did in 2000, the first part of the reading test was difficult, and I was struggling to keep up with time. And I almost panicked because I was like, if this first section is this hard, how would I be able to finish 40 questions within 60 minutes? By the time I moved into the second passage, I realized the second passage was easier than the first passage. I was able to meet up with time comfortably. And by the time I got to the third passage, I realized that it was very easy and I was able to finish. For some other people, the first passage will be the easiest. The second passage may be the hardest. The third passage might be in between. So you can't really tell how they will organize that. Speed is necessary. To answer 40 questions in IELTS within 60 minutes in the reading test is difficult, so you have to be super fast. Attention of 10 over 10 is needed, just like your listening test. Because you need so much speed and you have sometimes really long passages. Passages could be really long. Some questions could be really long. So questions could be really tricky and you have to really think about them. So that brings us to the technique. What technique do I personally advocate for in a reading test? The technique I used, and one of my friends, was kind enough to actually advise me on this technique, is to read through the question. So you have 40 questions. Start with question 1, read question 1, rush to the passage, search for the answer to question 1. Okay, you run through, you skim through. Usually the answer to question 1 will be in paragraph 1. So it's usually in sequential order. Usually the answer to question 1 will come before the answer to question 2. The answer to question 2 will come before the answer to question 3. The answer to question 3 will come before the answer to question 4, and so on. Usually it comes in that order. So you expect the answer to question 1 usually to be in paragraph 1. Sometimes it may be different, but usually it comes in a sequence. So you read question 2, you rush to the paragraph where you expect it to be, search for the answer and extract it and answer it. You move to question 3, so you keep doing that. You get to question 39, you search for the answer. You get to question 40, you search for the answer. The reason I advocate for this is the passages are usually long. You wouldn't really have time to read the passage and then start reading all the questions. You usually won't have time, except if you're someone who has that special ability to read very fast and remember things while they read. For most of us, we don't have that ability, okay? Because one of the functions of the human brain is to forget, okay? That's unfortunate, but that's the truth. One of the functions of the human brain is to forget. So you read question 1, search for the answer. Read question 2, search for the answer. Read question 3, search for, and keep going till you reach question 40. And once you've done that, you can be rest assured that you would score up to 30 or 33. And that will give you a comfortable 7.5 band. Okay? If you score the 33, you get band 7.5. Some people may choose to read, I've said that, some people may choose to read the whole passages, but that's not what I advocate for personally. Time is of essence, and we cannot emphasize this enough. You need to be super fast. And remember we said in the listening test, you have 10 minutes at the end to put your answers together. In the reading test, you don't have 10 minutes, because if they give you that 10 minutes, you still use the 10 minutes to keep, looking at the passage. The reason they give you 10 minutes in listening is that once the voice notes has stopped, you can't hear any passage again, isn't it? So that makes sense. There are different formats when it comes to the reading test. Different forms of questions. You have the multiple choice, usually best answer. So they'll give you an option of maybe 4 or 5 options. Question 1 might have 4 or 5 options. You have to choose the answer from A, B, C, or D. If the answer is A, you write A. Okay. You have questions where you have to fill in the blank spaces or complete sentences. So, you would just have to, they'll give you part of a sentence, you have a dash, and you have to search for the answer and fill it in. They have questions where you have to make inferences. Inferences means you need to understand the question and you have to interpret what the writer is saying. And there are questions where you have to identify which paragraph contains certain information. So they might ask you which paragraph contains so blah, blah, blah information. And you have to write maybe paragraph 1 or paragraph B or paragraph C, depending on how they've numbered those paragraphs. They have questions that are the yes, no, or not given formats. Sometimes they will ask you true, false, or not given. They might tell you answer yes, or answer no, or answer not given to the following questions. And then they'll give you a point, they'll give you an information, and you have to read through the passage. You have to decide if this information is yes, or no, or not given. So if that information is present in the passage, and it answers the question or it tallies with what the question is saying, you answer yes. If it doesn't tally with what the question is saying, you answer no. If that information is not given in that passage, you answer not given. If they tell you to answer true or false or not given, if the answer is true and you say yes, you fail. You fail that question. So true and yes are different. No and false are different, okay? So there are some forms of questions where you have to choose the most appropriate heading for paragraphs. So when you go to IELTS list, you see lots of examples, to some of these formats of questions. I'll do another video. I'll still do some, subsequent videos where we'll look at nitty-gritty on some of these things. So you have to choose the most appropriate paragraph for different heading for different paragraphs. And I think that's usually the most difficult form of question. In my exam, I think I had just 3 questions that had to do with choosing headings for paragraphs. I was quite lucky because I considered that the toughest format of questions, and having only 3 out of 40 questions made meant that was an easy exam for me. You could have questions where you have to label, maps or diagrams, okay? So this is an example of what filling in the blank spaces looks like. If we look here, we can see this is a year in 1839. It says changes to dash. So this is question 1. This means question 1. Changes to dash resulted in an increase in delivery of mail. So whatever. So when you see something like this is question 1, usually the answer will be in paragraph 1. You rush to paragraph 1, you skim, you look for a keyword. Usually you look for a keyword. The keyword here is mail and delivery. So there are 2 keywords, delivery and mail, and maybe increase, okay? Increase, delivery, mail. These are the keywords. You rush to paragraph 1, you skim through. And when I say you skim, you read through. You don't read, you're not really reading like, you're not studying it. You're reading through with the speed of light. You're skimming through that paragraph 1 with the speed of light to identify where they mention delivery and mail, things about delivery or sending a mail or posting a mail or posting letters. You're looking for those keywords. When you find those keywords, you want to see whether it talked about an increase. And then you now find out changes to something. It might be changes to certain policies in the post office or whatever. You extract that answer and you put it in your question 1. And you do the same thing for the rest of it. So this is an example of yes, no, and not given. I extracted this from the internet. Okay. Yes, no, or not given. And here we can see this question. It says, do the following statements agree with the claims of the writer in reading passage 3? In boxes 32 to 35 on your answer sheet, write yes, no, or not given. You write yes if the statement agrees with the claims of the writer. You write no if the statement contradicts the claims of the writer. You write not given if it is impossible to say what the writer thinks about this. Helium, question 32. Helium chooses to be on its own. You search the paragraphs, your passage, check what they think about helium. If nothing was said about this particular helium choosing to be on its own, you say not given. That information is not given. If helium chooses to be on its own, relates or agrees with what has been written in the paragraph, you write yes. If it contradicts, you write no. Sometimes they could tell you write true, false, or not given. So if they tell you to write true, use the word true, don't use yes. So you have to be very careful about that. This is what the answer sheet to the reading test looks like. So the answer sheet to your reading test and your listening test are identical. Usually, your reading and listening will be on the same paper. One, you answer your listening on one side and you answer the reading on the other side of the sheet. And after you've done your listening and reading, usually they will collect your answer sheets. The examiner will collect the answer sheets and then they will distribute the question papers and answer sheets for your writing tests. That's how it's done. Similar to the IELTS listening test, this is what the banding for your reading test looks like. Again, depending on what use, you're doing this IELTS exam for. As a medical doctor coming to work in the NHS, your target should be at least a band 7.5 across board. Okay? Try to get 7.5 in all your sections. That's the safety margin. That gives you the safety margin, the security you need. Okay, such that even if you make a mistake in one place and you score a 7, you can still have an average of 7.5. So your target should be having a 7.5 band across all board. So in your reading test, you should be trying to score at least 33, sometimes lower, depending on what you're using the IELTS exam for. Okay? So we've come to the end of this very quick, tips on passing a reading and listening test of the IELTS examination. In a different video, we would do different video would we'll talk about tips on how to pass the writing, and unfortunately it will just be the academic writing because that's the one that I am familiar with. They will also do some tips on how to pass, on how to perform well in the speaking tests, okay, on how to speak fluently, confidently, and things to bear in mind when addressing this. So if you think this has been really helpful, please like this video, subscribe to my channel, and share this with friends, okay, and other people that you think will benefit from this. Thank you.